Most families assume that self-catering is the cheaper option. I used to think the same until I actually sat down and worked out the real numbers. In this video, I'm going to show you why that assumption could cost you, and in one of the 2 destinations, it completely flipped what I expected. I'm also going to give you one piece of advice at the end that I think changes how most families do all-inclusive. So stick around for that, it's definitely worth it. So if you sat there trying to decide between self-catering and all-inclusive, then this video is definitely for you. No theory and no sponsored content. I'm just a dad who's taken a lot of family holidays, made plenty of mistakes along the way, and generally just wants to help you make the right call. I'm going to use 2 places that we recently went to, Albufeira in Portugal and Cala in Mallorca, to show you why location changes this decision more than anything else. Both priced through Jet2 because that is generally how families book their holidays, even when they're going self-catering. You get package protection, your suitcases are sorted, and there's just one number to call if God forbid anything does go wrong. And when you've got a family, that peace of mind really matters. So when it comes to cost, most people assume that self-catering is automatically the budget option, and I get why. The final price often looks cheaper, but here's what actually happens when you add everything up. First of all, in Cala, self-catering actually came out more expensive than the all-inclusive price. As a family, you need a proper apartment rather than a hotel room, and that pushes the cost right up. Then when you add meals, drinks, ice creams on top, when we've been there, we've easily spent over £100 a day between us. Self-catering ends up costing more than all-inclusive. And here's the thing, there are a lot less all-inclusive options in Cala. Most of the hotels cater for either self-catering, bed and breakfast, or half board. The marina, the restaurants on your doorstep, that place just lends itself to getting people out and about. In Cala, all-inclusive often results in better value, the opposite of what most people would believe. Albufeira is what really surprised me though. The price between self-catering and all-inclusive looked huge. Nearly £900 cheaper going self-catering. Definitely sounds like a no-brainer. But then when you add food, drinks and snacks, when we've been to Albufeira, we've easily spent like £80 to £100 a day between us. Do that over the week and that gap almost completely disappears. You're left with around about a £30 difference. So the final price is never the real price. And that's the thing to take away. Quick one before we move on, do you usually book self-catering or all-inclusive? Let me know in the comments below. So what does all-inclusive actually get right? For me, it comes down to one thing above everything else, location. And in Albufeira, depending on which hotel you're in, you're not always a short walk from a good restaurant. Sometimes it's a taxi into the strip, which sounds fine until you've got tired, hungry kids at 6:30 and everyone just wants to eat. The journey to getting food definitely feels long. All-inclusive takes that decision away, and there's a mental relief that people just don't seem to talk about. You've paid, you're not running a tab in your head every time someone wants something, you just say yes and get on with actually enjoying the holiday. And let's face it, kids don't just eat at meal times, they eat constantly. An ice cream at 2:30, something from the pool bar before dinner. On all-inclusive, you just say yes every single time, without having to do the maths. That's worth more than it sounds when you're trying to relax. Drinks work the same way. Now we're not massive drinkers, but just having the option without a bill appearing every single time generally feels a lot more relaxing. A coffee in the morning, a juice for the kids at lunch, a couple of cocktails by the pool, a few beers in the evening, none of it feels expensive because it's already paid for. And the hotel bar in the evening. Now I know it's not for everyone, but we generally love it. It's one of our favourite parts. Music on, we're playing a game of Uno, nobody rushing us, no bill coming, just completely switched off. That's what a holiday is supposed to feel like. But obviously all-inclusive definitely has its downsides. Food can get samey. By the end of the week, that buffet, you are desperate to just try somewhere else. And then there's the bubble feeling, like you've flown somewhere brilliant, but you're only really experiencing the resort, not the actual destination. But that bubble feeling, that's something that I want to talk about in just a moment, because I think there's a simple fix and it will definitely change how you look at all-inclusive holidays. If you're getting value from this, this is exactly what this channel is about. Family holidays with no fluff. If that interests you, then don't forget to subscribe. If you are watching from a TV, scan the QR code to subscribe. Self Catering gets something right that all inclusive generally can't. You actually feel like you're somewhere. Cala is one of the best examples that I can give you. It has a beautiful marina, there are some brilliant restaurants within walking distance, a real atmosphere in the evenings. Being self-catering there means every night is a little bit different. You find a place you love and go back, you stumble across something new, you eat local food outside and actually feel like you're in Mallorca, rather than a resort that could honestly be anywhere in the world. That sense of discovery for a lot of families, that is the holiday. That's what they'll be talking about months after the holiday. And self-catering gives you that just all-inclusive can't replicate. The freedom matters too. There's no schedule, no trying to get everyone to the dining room before it closes, no set meal times, you eat when you want, where you want. For some families, that's generally a better holiday, and there's nothing wrong with that at all. But self-catering obviously has its downside. Somebody has to be thinking every single day, what are we going to eat, where are we going to go, will the kids like it, and is it going to be suitable for them? It's not exactly stressful, but there's a low-level mental load that never really switches off. And obviously the costs creep up in ways that are hard to track until you get home and check your bank balance. So the one piece of advice that I mentioned at the start, don't use all-inclusive as an excuse to never leave the hotel, because that's where it gets a bad reputation. People fly somewhere brilliant, spend the whole week at the same buffet and the pool bar, come home and feel like they didn't really go anywhere. That's not an all-inclusive problem, that's a planning problem. So here's how we actually like to do it, because I think this is what makes all-inclusive work properly for a family. We go all-inclusive, we use what it's brilliant at, the snacks, the ice creams, the drinks by the pool, the food when we just want something easy. The kids can have whatever they want without us thinking about it. That side of the holiday is completely sorted. But we don't stay in the hotel, we get out. We'll eat out 2 or 3 times during the week, a proper local restaurant, somewhere that we've spotted on a walk, somewhere a bit different. We go out and we do as many trips as possible. We explore the local area on foot. We actually see the place we've flown into rather than just the inside of the resort. That combination, the security and the ease of the all-inclusive with the freedom to get out and experience the destination, that's the kind of all-inclusive holiday that I would recommend every single time. You're not stuck in a bubble, you're not paying an absolute fortune every single time you want a drink. It is the best of both. There's a playlist linked on the screen with more honest family travel advice. I'll keep adding to it. If there is anything that you would find useful, please do let me know in the comments below. But more than anything, I just hope that this helps you book something your family actually loves, because at the end of the day, that is what it's all about.